And we are back with part 2 of this week's reading through the Messianic Jewish Family Bible Tree of Life version, TLV, and we're doing the introduction and chapters 1 through 12 of Deuteronomy. And we are going to begin with chapter 1, Parashat Devarim. Devarim, the words that Moses spoke. These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel across the Jordan in the wilderness in the Arabah opposite Suf, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazareth, and Dizahab. It is 11 days' journey from Horeb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. Believe it or not, it took the children of Israel till they got to the Promised Land 40 years in the wilderness, where it would have just only taken 11 days had it not been for their unbelief and their disobedience to God, and they're not trusting, and they're mumbling and grumbling and all the things that ensued during this journey. So they were actually just wandering. Um, at the direction, of course, of Moses, and actually God led them, but he would have led them there a lot quicker had they been a little bit more cooperative. And again, as I had mentioned before, that whole first generation um, is not going to and will not see the promised land. As we're getting into Deuteronomy, most of them have died off or are going to die off. So we're going to have a new generation that is actually going to be the ones going into the promised land, save for Caleb and Joshua. They're the only ones from the original generation that left Egypt that will actually get to see the promised land. Um, Even Moses got to see it, but he will not get to step foot onto it because he struck the rock instead of speaking to the rock. As you know, God told him he wasn't going to go in either. Now Moses spoke to Bani Israel according to all Adonai had commanded him for them in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month, after he had struck down Sihon, king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon, and Og, king of the Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth and Edrei. Across the Jordan in the land of Moab, Moses began to explain this Torah, saying, Adonai, our God, spoke to us at Horeb, saying, You have stayed long enough at this mountain, turn journey on, and enter the hill country of the Amorites and all their neighbors in the Arabah, the hill country, the lowland, the Negev, and by the seashore, the land of the Canaanites and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the Euphrates. See, I have set the land before you. Enter and possess the land that Adonai swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give to them and to their descendants after them. And as I mentioned, um, and I may post some pictures if I can find some pictures of actually all the land that belongs to Israel, given by God. And if you look at what it looks like today, they're lacking quite a bit of land that actually should be theirs. Um, Yet they're being told they're occupying. I don't think so. God is the creator. God can decide who gets what. And God gave Israel a lot more land than what they are calling theirs. So if you really want to look at it, that land needs to be returned to them because God said so. But anyway, I digress. Bad report and poor response. I spoke to you at that time, saying, I am not able to bear the burden of you by myself. Adonai your God has multiplied you, and here you are today, like the stars of the heavens in numbers. May Adonai, God of your fathers, increase you 1,000 times as many as you are, and may he bless you just as he has promised you. How can I bear your load and burden and bickering by myself? Choose for yourselves wise and discerning men, well known to your tribes, and I will appoint them as your heads. So um, Moses is talking to them. The bad report and poor response is the title of this segment. Um, and there's a couple footnotes here that we may look at when I'm done with this section. You answered me and said, the thing you have said to do is good. So I took the heads of your tribes, men who were wise and well known, and appointed them as heads over you, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of fifties, leaders of tens, and officials for your tribes. I commanded your judges at that time, saying, hear cases between your brothers and judge fairly, between a man and his brother or the outsider with him. You must not show partiality in judgment. You must hear the small and the great alike. Fear no man, for the judgment is God's. The case that is too hard for you, you shall bring to me, and I will hear it. I commanded you at that time everything you should do. Then we journeyed from Horeb and went through all the great and terrible wilderness that you saw on the way to the hill country of the Amorites, as Adonai our God commanded us. Then we came to Kadesh Barnea. I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which Adonai our God is giving to us. See, Adonai your God has set the land before you. Go up, take possession, as Adonai God of your fathers has promised you. Do not be afraid or discouraged. Then all of you came near to me and said, let's send men ahead of us to explore the land for us and bring us back word about the way we should go up and the cities we will enter. The idea seemed good to me, so I took 12 men from among you, one man for each tribe. They turned and went up into the hill country, and they came to the Wadi Escol and spied it out. They took in their hands some of the fruit of the land and brought it down to us. They also brought back word to us and said, good is the land that Adonai our God is giving to us. Yet you would not go up, but rebelled against the command of Adonai your God. In your tents you grumbled and said, because Adonai hates us, he brought us out from the land of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites to destroy us. Where are we going? Our brothers have discouraged our hearts, saying, the people are greater and taller than we are. The cities are great and fortified up to the heavens. Besides, we have even seen the children of Anakim there, the giants. Then I said to you, don't tremble or be afraid of them. Adonai your God, who goes before you, he himself will fight for you, just as he did for you in Egypt before your own eyes, and in the wilderness, where you saw how Adonai your God carried you, as a man carries his son everywhere you went, until you came to this place. Yet for all this, you do not trust in Adonai your God, the one who goes before you on the way to scout out a place for you to camp, and to show you the way you should go, in fire by night and in the cloud by day. When Adonai heard the tone of your words, he was angry and swore an oath, saying, not one of these men of this evil generation will see the good land that I swore to give your fathers, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh. He will see it. Yet to him and his children I will give the land that he has walked on, because he has followed Adonai wholeheartedly. Adonai was even angry with me on your account, saying, you will not enter there either. Joshua, son of Nun, who stands before you, will enter there. Encourage him, for he will enable Israel to inherit it. Joshua is going to actually take over, as we will see. Moreover, your little ones, whom you said would become plunder, and your children, who today have no knowledge of good or evil, they will enter there. To them I will give it, and they will possess it. But as for you, turn around and journey into the wilderness by way of the Sea of Reeds. Then you answered and said to me, we have sinned against Adonai. We will go up and fight, just as Adonai our God commanded us. So each of you strapped on his weapons of war, figuring it was easy to go up to the hill country. But Adonai said to me, tell them, do not go up and fight, for I am not with you, and you will be defeated by your enemies. So I told you, but you would not listen. You rebelled against the command of Adonai and presumptuously, excuse me, losing my voice here, presumptuously went up into the hill country, the Amorites who lived in that hill country came out against you, and they chased you as bees do, and scattered you from Seir to Hormah. Then you returned and wept before Adonai, but Adonai did not listen to your voice or pay attention to you. So you stayed in Kadesh many days, like the days you had spent before. And that's the end of chapter 1. So Moses is recapping their history and some of the history and what they had been through. Yeah, there's a footnote note referring to Hebrews chapter 6 verses 13 to 14, and that deals with the promise and the oath. Now when God made his promise to Abraham, since he could swear by no one greater, he swore by himself, saying, "Surely I will bless you, and surely I will multiply you." And so after waiting patiently, Abraham reached the promise. And actually, we're seeing that that promise had already been fulfilled because Abraham's seed was greatly multiplied. Israel was a great nation and a great many people at this time, and a great many people that had came out of Egypt. And the next promise that was about to be fulfilled was going into the promised land that was promised actually to Abraham. And there might be a little interference here. There was some real big blip that went right across this screen here with the online recorder. So I'm not sure what that's going to sound like. That was really interesting. I never saw that happen. There's another footnote, and it's referring to the book of James, which in the Messianic um, Tree of Life version, it's known as the book of Jacob. So James is Jacob in this Bible. It is chapter 2, verse 1 and 9. My brothers and sisters, do not hold the faith of our glorious Lord Yeshua, the Messiah, while showing favoritism. And verse 9 says, "But if you show favoritism, you are committing sin and are convicted by the Torah as transgressors." So, what they're referring to, is to not show favoritism or partiality in judgment. And they were referring back to those the judges that were appointed, that they're not to show favoritism, they're to be fair in their in their just in bleh, I can't talk, in their judgment, and allow be not fearful, because God is the ultimate judge, is what Moses had told them. Okay, before we move on, I just want to make sure there's no other footnotes. And before we move on to chapter 2, I just want to mention, the book of Deuteronomy was also written approximately 1450 to 1400 BC by Moses. Most of the book. Now, of course, the very end of the book was not written by Moses, because he died. So, but the majority of this book was written by Moses. Um, and it is the final book that, he had taken part in writing. In this book, there are the final preparations being made for Israel to enter the promised land. And the theme of this book is obedience brings blessings, while disobedience brings curses. And we kind of alluded to that earlier with the blessings and the cursings. This is also Moses' farewell address to the people on the eve of the entry of Bnei Israel into the promised land. And we talked about what the word Deuteronomy means. Um, so there was a restatement of the Sinai covenant, and the Ten Commandments are also repeated in this book, which we're going to find out. So their history is repeated in in the covenant that they made. And of course, the Ten Commandments were originally given in Exodus 20, chapter 20. As I mentioned, Moses is the writer of this book, as as the other 4 books of the Torah. Moses died before the close of this book, and it is believed that Joshua wrote the last part of this book, the last actual chapter of this book. Deuteronomy is a book of transitions, transition to a new generation, a new possession, new experience, and a new revelation of God's love. From Genesis to Numbers, God's love is not mentioned. In the book of Deuteronomy, God's love is mentioned many times. The structure of Deuteronomy, looking back, Deuteronomy 1 to 11, is actually the looking back, what they have been through. And as we go forward with chapters 12 to 34, that is looking forward. And again, I mentioned the Shema, the first and greatest commandment, was given in Deuteronomy chapter 6, 4 to 9, which we're going to get to. And Jesus, Yeshua, stated this also in Matthew 22, 35 to 39. You can find the Shema um, spoken by Yeshua, by Jesus. Moses reviews with the children of Israel, if that God brought us out, might bring us in, and which God sware unto our fathers. These are the things that were quotes. This shows the power of God, the grace of God, the faithfulness of God, and this is the basic truth of Deuteronomy. The basic requirement is to obey. The basic pledge of Deuteronomy is from God to the people that He is merciful, would never forsake them or destroy them, and would never forget the covenant made with their fathers. The basic differences in Deuteronomy are with the Old Covenant focused on the place, the land promised, in other words, and in the New Covenant, Yeshua changed the emphasis from a place to a person. He spoke of the true worshipers, worshiping the fathers in spirit and in truth. And we had just gone through chapter 1, where Moses tells of God's guidance. He reviewed how God guided them. He's looking back on what they've been through. There are 11 days' journey from Horeb by the way of Mount Seir unto Kadesh Barnea, but it had taken 40 years for Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, because of unbelief and disobedience. They had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of Bashan. And the Lord was commanding that the children go into the land that was promised to them. In the second part of this chapter, the choice of leaders is made. The chief men of the tribes and wise men were made captains and judges. And in the third part of this chapter, there is the report of the spies that was reviewed too. The 12 men, one from each tribe had gone and searched out the land that God promised to them, and they took the fruit of the land, brought it back, saying, "It is good land which the Lord our God gives us." But in the last part of the chapter, Israel began their murmurings again. The spies spoke of giants in the land, and the people stayed in their tents and murmured and complained. Joshua and Caleb were the only ones not involved in the bad report that the other 10 spies gave, and they believed God would fight for them and help them. And Bnei Israel was reluctant to fight the Amorites, which made their journey longer. So that is where we're at, and we're going to begin chapter 2 when we come back with part 3.